let's start off with some good news. We'll start off with some good news that I noticed, and then we'll get into some foolishness that I noticed over the past week, and then end up with some tips on what I think we all can do to try to live above the circumstances. So here's something that I noticed over the past week. You may have heard that the Surgeon General of Florida, the state of Florida, mentioned that in Florida, they're going to try to get rid of all of the vaccine mandates in that state. What else happened in Florida last week probably got overshadowed by that story, and I want to share that because this is also a big deal in my opinion. So let's get into that video.
Constitutional authority to do the local taxes. That is your counties and your cities. So what we're going to do is we're going to place a question on the ballot that is going to allow Floridians to be able to vote themselves relief from property tax. And as I said, my vision is, if you own your home, to truly own it, you have to own it free and clear of the government. You shouldn't have to pay rent to the government. And, there'll be people that are, buying investment properties, fine, that's different. There's differences, but your personal home, we really believe should not be subject to tax. It's an unrealized gain. And I'm just one that's if you tax me at point of sale, I buy a car and I pay a sales tax on it. But for me to then just, pay a tax on the value every now, cars usually when you drive them off the lot go down. Now during COVID, the cars actually went up in value. You'd buy a car, there was such a shortage that you could drive it off the lot and then you could even flip it for $5,000-$10,000 profit because there was such a rush to buy vehicles. But that's our vision.
Okay, that's interesting to me. That's a big story that the state, and this is coming from the governor himself, standing at a podium in front of the press talking about how they're going to try to end property taxes in their state. And they're going to put it up for the voters to vote that. And if that doesn't get passed, my goodness, you really got to think about election integrity in that state if they don't pass that. What I thought, well, he also mentioned when he pays for his car, he doesn't have to keep paying taxes. There are some states where you have to do that. Virginia is one of them. They call that a personal property tax, where you own the car and every year you still have to pay some sort of tax on it. So that's that. But the big thing I thought about this particular story is, one, how are they going to find taxes otherwise? The revenue, heaven forbid, they actually live within their budget or just find ways to do things with less money, but maybe they'll find it with a sales tax. But the big story for me being a Texan is, why is this kind of leadership coming from Florida? It wasn't that long ago when Florida was a swing state, and you would think this kind of activity would come from the big red kahuna of Texas, but we're not getting that kind of leadership. It wasn't that long ago, about 4 years ago in February, where the residents were freezing because there wasn't enough energy to heat the homes of folks during the wintertime. Now, in terms of the foolishness that I noticed, here's a story that I saw right before I started this video called "Expectations for Finding Work After Losing a Job Just Hit a Record Low." Let's dive into this. Respondents perceived the probability of landing a job after losing their current job fell to the lowest measure in the New York Fed's survey's history, which in a kind of off way could be good news, because it's been this Federal Reserve which has said that unemployment is low and that's why they don't need to lower rates. Anyway, let's go further. The story says Americans' confidence in their ability to find work is tanking. No kidding. I know the feeling. They've been taking this kind of survey since 2013. This sentence here is a little confusing. They're saying in the history of this survey, they're saying the respondents perceived their probability of landing a job after losing their current job fell to 44.9%. Well, how do they define that? I didn't take the time to look it up, but when I was looking, my belief that I would find another job was 100%. I just did not know how long it was going to take. So I would like to know what period they're asking people for this. Are you asking them, what's the probability that you'll find work in 30 days? You think it's 100%? You think you'll find work in 60 days? In 1 week? Okay, if you asked me in 1 week, I probably would have said 10%. But if you ask me overall, as long as I live in the next couple of years, will I find something? Yeah, I thought it'd be 100%, but I didn't think it would take as long as it did. So I'd be curious. I guess not curious enough to dig into the details, but that's what they're saying. Expectations for higher unemployment a year from now and losing one's job in the next 12 months has also increased. So, yeah, I'm not surprised at that. Oh, here's another thing that I saw. Another piece of sour news for the unemployed. The U.S. had more job seekers than open jobs in July for the first time since 2021. Meaning there's more people looking for jobs than there were available jobs. That is news to me too, because I've always heard people say, well, we've got all these different jobs. 6 million jobs, but we only have 4 million people looking for jobs. That's why we need to bring in all of these immigrants. That was their justification. We have so many jobs, but we don't have the people to fill them. And then we're being told, oh, the jobs are all going to be replaced because of AI. Well, this is my take on that. I do believe jobs are going to be taken by AI, just not artificial intelligence. Here's the two forms of AI that I think are going to be taking a lot of jobs. AI number one, America's illegals. That's a form of AI that's taken away some jobs. AI number two, Asian Indians. Those are the two forms of AI that are taking away jobs. America's illegals and Asian Indians who are here on visas. And we found out a couple of weeks ago there are 55 million people here on visas, and just like illegal immigrants, illegal aliens, they can have anchor babies here too. You can have someone be here on an H-1B and their spouse can be on an HB. They both can be working. They can have a child. That child's a citizen by this birthright citizenship. And then they can stay here forever because of that. So it's just as bad, 55 million. Student visas too. I imagine if you're a student and you hook up with somebody and while you're here as a student, you have a child. Well, then that child by birthright citizenship is now a citizen, and then they get to be the anchor baby for you to stay here indefinitely. And because 40% of the people who are here illegally overstayed their visas, that becomes a big problem. And that's why those two forms of AI, America's illegals and Asian Indians, are taking away the jobs and the slots for students in schools. So that's the foolishness that I noticed this week. What are some of the positives that I've noticed that we can do to overcome, to try to live above the circumstances? Well, this is something that I noticed. This is the historical chart of the price of gold over 100 years. And this is a way to kind of track inflation. My grandfather was born in 1926. An ounce of gold was about $20. He was born in July, so $20, $21. And then they had, I guess, Great Depression, and around here, 100 years ago, $19. We're talking World War I. And then my grandfather's born during the roaring 20s and then the Great Depression. But you notice right here, it's flat for a long time, around $35. Flat, flat, flat throughout World War II, the Korean War, Vietnam, and then woo, what happens here? What happens there is our government decided to no longer have our money be backed by precious metals, no longer backed by gold. And then it was President Nixon at the time, who's not a dumb man. He was not a dumb man. And he intended to do it temporarily. I think that's pretty dumb. If you know anything about government history, you know, I heard Reagan say that one of the closest thing to immortality on earth is a government program. Because once it begins, it's hard to get rid of one. They live forever. In fact, I remember there used to be this tax on our telecommunications bills. Your cell phone bill, your personal home phone bill. It was a federal excise tax of 3%. It's no longer there, and the reason why is because a guy who ran for president at the time, Steve Forbes, made fun of it. He talks about how that tax was to help fund the Spanish-American War from decades ago. And yet we were still paying that tax in the late 1990s and the early 2000s, because once the government starts getting a tax, once they start a program, it's hard to get rid of it. But he made significant fun of it, that they at least got rid of the line item, but they're probably still getting the money somehow. But nevertheless, let's go back to this chart. It goes up, you know, you have Gerald Ford as president, it's going up, 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 up. And they don't like it. I mean, before Nixon could do anything about it, he's leaving office because of some scandal. And then you have Gerald Ford, and then people don't like how, gosh, it was $35 an ounce. Now it's in a matter of 4 years, it's $180 an ounce for the same ounce of gold, just because we took our money off of the gold standard. And people are looking for change, and then you have Jimmy Carter. And Jimmy goes, whoa, I'm the first Democrat president after we're no longer on the gold standard. What do I do with this? And now it's $660 when just 10 years ago it was $35 for an ounce of gold. And people don't like what he's doing. And then you have Ronald Reagan come in, and he stabilizes it for a little while throughout the 80s. Then you have Mr. George H.W. Bush, kinder, gentler president. We're going to have a kinder, gentler nation. He stabilizes it a little bit too, and then same thing with Clinton. And then you get over here and the dot-com bubble. And then, whoa, what happens? September 11th. Oh, war. Spend, more money. Then you have the housing crisis. Oh, TARP, Troubled Asset Relief Program. We got to talk, too big to fail. We got to print more money. And then, bam, people don't like that, so they put Obama in office. Then he has stimulus and quantitative easing 1, quantitative easing 2. Then people get used to that extra money being into the marketplace. It stabilizes a little bit. Trump comes into office. Things are stable a bit, and then bam, COVID. Well, let's print more money. And then trillions and trillions. Well, I bring all that up because I'm saying, hey, when you know the game that's being played, perhaps you know how to play defense. If you haven't heard of a person named G. Edward Griffin, it would behoove you to look him up on YouTube and watch a couple videos where the title is the creature from Jekyll Island. And he'll school you on what's really happening with our dollars, what's happening with currency, so you're not just living under the circumstances. You'll recognize the game that's being played and know how to at least play defense. You know the rules, who's benefiting no matter what the economic policy is. And you'll say, as for me and my house, this is what we're going to do. And that's what I've done to give myself a chance, because I recognize the game that's being played. And I only learned about G. Edward Griffin maybe in the past 3 years. I only learned about the creature from Jekyll Island in the past 3 years or so. But prior to that, I was just kind of studious and reasonably responsible with my money anyway, because I respect it. I know how hard it was to earn, and I just don't want to be frivolous with it. So anyway, I wanted to cover some good news at the beginning, get into some foolishness that I noticed, and then end it with some things that we all can do in order to try to live above the circumstances, because I think we deserve it. And know what the real AI is that is replacing American workers, and what we can do about that as well. That's all I have for now. Talk to you the next time. Bye-bye.